There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah, and it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you.
You couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is.
Hold on tight, because Quentin Tarantino just obliterated modern Hollywood in a scorched earth interview with the ever-controversial Bill Maher. And the wreckage is still smoldering. This wasn't some polite chat. No, this was an all-out verbal bloodbath, and nobody walked away clean. Tarantino came out swinging, ripping into the industry's loudest woke warriors, and branding them as nothing more than performative clowns drowning in hypocrisy. And Bill Maher, he wasn't just a bystander. He brought gasoline to the fire, fueling the fury with razor-sharp barbs that left Hollywood's elite squirming. Together, they dismantled the fake outrage machine piece by piece with brutal honesty and zero apologies. This was raw. This was unfiltered. This was the take no prisoner SmackDown Hollywood didn't want you to see. If you're tired of scripted interviews and sanitized sound bites, buckle up, because moments like this, they're explosive.
Before we run out of time, I have to say to you, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
We've heard Bill Maher rip into Hollywood's obsession with woke fluff time and time again. I've covered it right here on this channel. From trading gripping narratives for hollow virtue signals to replacing real depth with trending hashtags, the industry has lost the plot. But in that thick, suffocating cloud of ideological noise, a few voices still cut through, and one of the loudest is Quentin Tarantino. Even Maher, who doesn't hand out praise lightly, gives him his due. Why? Because Tarantino isn't playing by the new rules. He doesn't kneel, doesn't preach, and definitely doesn't carry the infection of Hollywood's woke hysteria. He's old school in the best way possible, a filmmaker who makes you think, not just clap. While the rest of the industry tiptoes through political minefields, Tarantino grabs a paintbrush and draws chaos in full color. He's bold, unfiltered, and fearless. And in this watered-down Hollywood, that's a revolution.
There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah, and it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers.
This is why Bill Maher actually respects Quentin Tarantino, because he's one of the few on the left bold enough to call out the insanity on his own side. Hollywood isn't about stories anymore. It's about performative wokeness. Case in point, the Snow White reboot disaster. Instead of casting real little people, they went CGI, not to be inclusive, but to look progressive. The result? A total flop that insulted the very actors it claimed to protect. Tarantino and Maher aren't having it. They're done with the lies, and they're not afraid to say it.
Are you bullish on the future of movies? Because
well, look, you have to always look at.
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happened. This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves. All right, so it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s. All right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful. All right, and
Tarantino didn't hold back, calling out the so-called golden age of the 1950s as a sanitized lie wrapped in censorship and fear. Even with the Hays Code, he pointed out, pre-war films dared to go dark, to challenge, to unsettle. But once the war ended, Hollywood got neutered, The 50s became the decade of fake smiles and locked lips, where you couldn't speak a word of truth, even if you had a mouthful, as Tarantino put it. It was all gloss, no guts. And he's not letting anyone romanticize it.
Every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is. And then, to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood is the 50s. And the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2.
Let's hit pause, because Tarantino just dropped a brutal truth bomb that Hollywood doesn't want to hear. He brought up the Hays Code, that old-school censorship rulebook from the 1930s that muzzled movies under the guise of morality. Back then, it was all about protecting the public from anything too raw, too real. But now, that same chilling silence is back, just in a different costume. Tarantino's take? Today's censors aren't pearl-clutching moralists, they're digital pitchfork mobs. Social justice warriors who weaponize outrage, punishing any film that steps outside their rigid narrative. Art isn't judged on craft anymore, it's judged on how well it parrots the latest Twitter-approved slogans. Directors self-edit, studios fold. Creativity dies quietly in the corner. This isn't progress. It's just a new form of censorship with better branding, and Tarantino's calling it exactly what it is: dangerous.
Right.
But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood
Bonnie
comes
and
out.
Clyde.
Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then we went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first. This is basically the 80s part 2, what we're living through right now.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new golden age. Please be there and part of it.
Now here's where things get really interesting. Tarantino actually believes that Hollywood is starting to purge itself of the woke virus. And if that's true, hallelujah. It's about damn time. For years, the industry's been drowning in performative activism and preachy scripts, churning out movies that feel more like lectures than entertainment. Creativity got muzzled, storytelling was hijacked by ideological checklists. And audiences? They checked out. But Tarantino sees a shift coming, a course correction. And if we're truly heading toward a new era, one where bold characters, raw emotion, and fearless storytelling come first, then we might just be witnessing the rebirth of real cinema. No more sanitized scripts, no more politically correct puppeteering. Just films that hit hard, speak truth, and actually matter. That's the Hollywood we've been missing. But just when things sounded hopeful, Tarantino dropped something dark. A disturbing take he shared with Joe Rogan. Watch this.
And then there's like, okay, this guy or this woman is going to write a think piece in the New York about my movie, or in the Los Angeles Times, or in the New York Times, and they're going to write some think piece about it, or on this website or that website. And they're going to go against it and talk about, oh, this is a retrograde vision, or that this is a regressive vision, or Quentin has become right wing, and this movie has a right wing bent because of the way they, Quentin is identifying with Rick Dalton with the fucking hippies. That's how it's.
Is that really a take that someone had that you've become right wing because of the character in the film?
Even like a critic who liked it, A.O. Scott, goes, well, this whole vision seems more on the right than you would imagine.
This might sound wild, but it's happening way more than people want to admit, especially on the left. Far too often, films are no longer judged by their craft or message, but by their political alignment. If a movie even hints at a conservative undertone, boom, instant outrage. Suddenly it's not a film anymore, it's a battlefield. The cast gets dragged, the writers get smeared, and anyone even tangentially connected becomes a target. But here's the hard truth Tarantino and a few brave voices keep shouting: cinema isn't supposed to be a political safe space. It's supposed to be raw, unpredictable, messy, and yes, sometimes uncomfortable. Movies aren't propaganda machines, they're mirrors. They reflect society in all its contradictions, not just the parts that fit a hashtag. Dismissing a film just because it doesn't align with your worldview, that's not activism. That's censorship in disguise. And it's strangling the very soul of storytelling.
Doesn't necessarily make it wrong, make it bad, but it just seems like more on the right. Well, Rick is coming from a place more on the right, not me.
Yeah.
per se, but I am telling the story through Rick's point of view. And then, they say something, well, how come they don't talk about, how come there aren't more black characters in the movie? How come they don't talk about the Vietnam War more? Well, basically, the movie takes place between 2 days. Okay, well, they didn't bump into Jim Brown, right, on those 2 days. All right, they saw who they fucking saw. Yeah. During those 2 days. Well, they didn't have a conversation about Vietnam in those 2 days. I can't just deal with all the hot button issues if I'm set up in a thing between 2 days. Oh, Margaret Robbie doesn't talk enough. She spends the entire movie by her fucking self. I could have given her if you were just counting lines, I could have put Mr. Saperstein in the car, with her dog, and she could have just been having a running commentary with her dog about picking up Roman's dry cleaning and getting the book, and maybe I'll go see the movie. And, that would have actually taken care of the line count, but it would have been bullshit.
Exactly. It's time the outrage brigade, the self-appointed social justice gatekeepers, and hypersensitive critics finally grasped a basic truth. Not every movie is a sermon. Some films are made to entertain, to let us laugh, escape, breathe. And guess what? That's not just valid, it's essential. Others tackle the heavy stuff, diving deep into raw, controversial themes. Both have their place, both are cinema. What the mob keeps forgetting is that directors aren't activists, they're storytellers. And those stories don't always reflect personal politics, they reflect human experience. Characters, perspectives, and messy contradictions that aren't meant to be sanitized or politically correct. But when filmmakers are forced to jam in a social message just to appease the noise, that's not progress. That's the death of authenticity. It's creative vandalism masked as virtue. Great movies don't preach. They hit you in the gut. They stay with you because of their truth, their characters, their emotional power, not because they passed some ideological purity test. Tarantino gets it. And it's time the rest of Hollywood did too.
It doesn't seem like part of the problem is just that it came out during the time where Trump was president, and that's one of the reasons why these political takes on things, like that he's more to the right, or I can't imagine that anybody would think that you're leaning right now, that Quentin is becoming right because your character is. That seems so stupid, but it's more of it's just a statement about the politicalization of everything.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're correct. And the thing about it, though, is, look, those kind of academic college think pieces, they're just fine. In a college situation, they make sense. I can take a book or a movie and come up with some argument that goes, that's that's more of a subtextual argument about a film. That doesn't mean I'm right, but it means I can make my little argument,
right?
For the course. But it doesn't. But I have no illusions that that's what the director was thinking about. Now, ultimately, when it comes to subtextual criticism, it doesn't matter. It's simply you making your little case. But in the heat of the moment, they're actually treated more seriously than that.
How do you parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film? Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are. All right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and where they're talking about. But
Quentin Tarantino just drew a hard, unbreakable line in the sand. Everyone can have their opinion. That's free speech. But when criticism slides into vicious character assassination just because his movies attract right-leaning fans, that's crossing into a dangerous, ugly territory. He's not here to play nice or pander to the masses. Tarantino's mission is to shake the cage, provoke, and make you think. Not to be a political puppet, so go ahead, slam the film if it doesn't land for you. But dragging his name through the mud, reducing him to a political punching bag, that's not critique. It's a toxic campaign of censorship disguised as righteous fury, and Tarantino isn't backing down.
How do you parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film? Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are. All right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and where they're talking about. But within 3 paragraphs, I see what this guy or woman is coming from, and they either like my stuff or they don't like it.
Right.
And if they're inclined to like my stuff and they go negative on it, that's interesting to see what it is that did that. I mean, a lot of the critics that like me didn't like Hateful Eight. It all came down to the fact that it was just too rough a vision for them. It was just too cynical. It was too cruel. And that's one of my favorite movies, because I mean, I feel like, wow, that's the Sam Peckinpah movie I always wanted to make. It's a fucking cruel, pitiless vision. But it's called The Hateful Eight. The idea is there's no good guys in the movie.
At the end of the day, Quentin Tarantino delivers a blazing wake-up call that can't be ignored. True art isn't about playing it safe or bending to the ever-changing whims of ideological fads. Real art is meant to ignite passion, entertain fiercely, and hold a raw mirror up to life's messy, complicated truths. In an industry suffocating under performative wokeness and political correctness, Tarantino stands out as one of the last true rebels who refuses to bow down to the ideological mobs. Even harsh critics like Bill Maher respect him because he's unafraid to call out woke culture's absurdity and fight for creative freedom. His message is clear. Filmmakers must be allowed to tell their stories without living in fear of being canceled or silenced. Not every film has to push a political agenda. Not every director should be boxed in by the endless culture wars tearing Hollywood apart. If the industry is truly waking up from its performative haze and moving toward a new era of bold, unapologetic storytelling, then I'm all in. Because art only thrives where freedom reigns, not where ideological purity tests decide what's acceptable. If Tarantino is right, and Hollywood is finally shaking off this suffocating woke coma, get ready for a cinematic revolution, raw, honest, and unfiltered. No more preachy lectures disguised as entertainment, no more forced agendas shoved into every frame, just pure storytelling fire that grips you and never lets go. If you're fed up with all the noise, cancel culture, and political policing, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.